This is not a story about a traffic stop. This is a story about a man who woke up with a badge and went to bed wondering if he'd lose it forever. When the dashcam begins recording, it captures only a quiet street, the hum of a distant highway, and one moment that would spiral into a department-wide scandal. Officer Daniel Mercer believed he was making a simple stop. He was wrong. The man he targeted wasn't just any driver. He was someone who carried the one badge the entire department feared: internal affairs. It was just after sunset in Riverside, California. Orange light clung to the edges of buildings as the city prepared for night. Jonathan Hale, age 42, drove home from a hospital visit with his daughter. His tie was loosened, his eyes tired, his mind focused on nothing but getting home. He slowed at a yellow light. Then, blue and red filled his rearview mirror. Jonathan sighed and pulled over. Officer Mercer stepped out of his cruiser. His shoulders squared. His chin lifted with artificial authority. He walked like a man who wanted a reason to escalate. "License and registration," he snapped. Jonathan handed them over calmly. He had been through dozens of these interactions in his career, but always as the investigator, never the target. "You rolled that light back there," Mercer said. Jonathan blinked. "I believe I stopped in time, officer." Mercer's eyes narrowed. He didn't like being disagreed with, not even politely. Mercer studied Jonathan the way a predator studies hesitation. "Where you headed?" "Home." "You live around here?" "Yes." "Why are you dressed like that?" "Because I came from work." The questions weren't about information. They were about control. Jonathan remained calm, but inside, something twisted. He had seen this pattern before: officers fishing, pushing, provoking. Mercer leaned closer. "You look nervous." Jonathan wasn't. But Mercer needed a narrative, and he was shaping one. "Step out for me," Mercer ordered. Jonathan inhaled slowly. "Is there a reason?" Mercer's jaw tightened. "I said step out." And just like that, the tone shifted from nuisance to danger. Jonathan stepped out, hands visible. Mercer circled him slowly. "Hands on the hood." Jonathan complied. The search was rough, too rough, the kind meant to provoke a reaction. But Jonathan didn't give him one. "Nothing on you," Mercer muttered, disappointed. Jonathan turned around. "Officer, what exactly do you think I've done?" Mercer smirked. "You tell me." There it was. The moment Mercer revealed what he had really been looking for. Power, not truth. "You seem awfully confident," Mercer said. "Like you know the law better than I do." Jonathan didn't respond. Mercer stepped closer. "Who are you exactly? Some kind of lawyer?" Jonathan didn't answer, not yet. Mercer took silence as defiance. "Turn around," he barked. "I'm detaining you." Jonathan exhaled. "Officer, before you make a decision you can't take back, you need to see something. Don't reach for anything," Mercer shouted, stepping back and gripping his holster. Jonathan's voice stayed level. "I am reaching slowly for my wallet." "Why?" "To show you my badge." Mercer paused, uncertain. Jonathan pulled out the leather case, opened it, and revealed the gold emblem. "Internal Affairs, Senior Investigator Jonathan Hale." Mercer's face drained of color. Jonathan's voice was controlled but sharp. "My job is simple. I investigate officer misconduct. And tonight you've given me a lot to write down." Mercer's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot." Jonathan stepped closer. "You profiled me. You escalated without reason. You searched me illegally. And you tried to detain me based on ego, not evidence." "That's not what happened," Mercer began. Jonathan held his gaze like a mirror. "Then tell me, officer, why did you really pull me over?" Silence. And in that silence, Mercer realized something. This wasn't a traffic stop anymore. It was a reckoning. Jonathan got back into his car, leaving Mercer frozen on the roadside. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "You'll be hearing from Internal Affairs." And he drove away. But the story didn't end there. The next morning, Jonathan retrieved Mercer's file. Prior complaints. traffic stops targeting out-of-town drivers, 2 uninvestigated excessive force allegations, a pattern of escalation. This wasn't random. This was a problem waiting to explode. Jonathan met with the police chief. He explained everything calmly, professionally, but with weight. Either he changes, Jonathan said, or the department changes him. Internal Affairs launched a full investigation. Bodycam footage confirmed Jonathan's account. But something else came up. Mercer had intentionally deactivated his microphone, a violation that alone could cost him his badge. Witnesses came forward. Old complaints resurfaced. Patterns emerged. Mercer wasn't just a bad officer. He was the result of a culture that rewarded aggression over accountability. Jonathan pushed for department-wide reform. Heavy checkmark new training. Heavy checkmark mandatory bodycam audits. Heavy checkmark community oversight. Heavy checkmark and psychological screening for officers with repeated escalations. The chief didn't love it, but he couldn't deny it. Jonathan was right. A judge, a hospital, a long day. The fluorescent lights in St. Alden's Hospital buzzed faintly, casting a pale glow across the stark white hallway. Judge Jonathan Hale sat in a molded plastic chair outside room 214, elbows on his knees, staring at the tiled floor. It had been a grueling court day, 3 hearings, 1 emergency review, and a last-minute injunction. But none of that weighed on him as heavily as the soft, labored breathing coming from behind the door. His mother, Evelyn Hale, once a lively teacher known for her warmth and humor, now lay in a hospital bed recovering from complications after heart surgery. Jonathan had spent every free moment by her side. A nurse tapped him gently on the arm. "Judge Hale? She's resting now. You can head home for the night." He nodded. "Thank you. Please call me if anything changes." As he stepped into the cool evening air outside the hospital, the sky was fading into a soft morning blue. Jonathan exhaled deeply. "All I need is 5 minutes of quiet," he whispered to himself. He got into his sedan and began the drive home, unaware that the next 20 minutes would upend his entire life. At first, the flashing lights behind him didn't register. His mind was still in the hospital, replaying the doctor's explanation. But the siren chirped sharply. Jonathan frowned, signaled, and pulled over to the side of a quiet suburban street just after sunrise. In his rearview mirror, a tall officer approached with a rigid gait. Officer Daniel Mercer. His jaw was clenched, his hand resting an inch from his holster. Jonathan rolled down his window. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" "License and registration. Now." "No greeting. No explanation." Jonathan handed them over calmly. "May I ask why I was stopped?" Mercer leaned closer, eyes narrowed. "You made an improper lane change." Jonathan blinked. "Officer, I signaled." Mercer slammed his palm on the roof of the car. "Get out. Step to the front of the vehicle." Shock rippled through Jonathan. "I'm complying, but I'd like to understand." Mercer cut him off. "Out. Now." Jonathan stepped out, keeping his hands visible. Mercer circled him like a predator. "You look nervous." "My mother is in the hospital, officer."
"I'm tired."
"That's all." Mercer smirked. "We'll see." That was the moment Jonathan knew something was wrong. Terribly wrong. "Hands on the hood," Mercer barked. "Officer, I don't consent to." Mercer shoved him forward. Jonathan steadied himself on the cold metal of his own car. "Officer, I am a sitting judge." "Oh, is that supposed to scare me?" Mercer snapped. "Judges think they run the world." "Well, not today." Jonathan's jaw tensed. "I'm simply informing you of my position, so you understand the gravity of what you're doing." Mercer didn't care. He patted Jonathan down aggressively, yanking at his pockets, reaching inside without permission. Jonathan spoke slowly through gritted teeth. "You are performing an unconstitutional search." Mercer leaned close, whispering venom into Jonathan's ear. "Prove it." Then he said the words that chilled Jonathan to his core. "Let's see what we find." When Mercer reached into Jonathan's inner jacket pocket, he froze. His fingers touched a leather case. Mercer pulled it out, an Internal Affairs Division identification badge. The badge gleamed in the morning light. Mercer's face drained of color. Jonathan turned his head slightly. That's the badge of the man you're unlawfully searching. I'm on the review board for officer conduct. Mercer stepped back, panic flickering in his eyes. You planted that. That's fake. Jonathan straightened. Officer Mercer, you've made a catastrophic mistake. Mercer fumbled with his radio, his voice shaking. Dispatch. I need backup. Jonathan spoke firmly. No. You need a lawyer. Back at the station, Mercer tried desperately to rewrite the story. He was aggressive. He resisted. I thought he had a weapon, he told his sergeant. But Jonathan's dash cam, and Mercer's own body cam, told the truth. The footage was irrefutable. By noon, Internal Affairs had opened a formal investigation. By sunset, headlines were already circulating. Judge illegally searched by officer, investigation underway. Mercer watched from the hallway as reporters swarmed outside the precinct like vultures. His career was evaporating before his eyes. Jonathan sat in the Internal Affairs interview room, recordings of Mercer's violations displayed on screens around him. Lead investigator Marla Ortiz leaned forward. Judge Hale, this is not an isolated incident. Mercer has 9 prior complaints. Excessive force, unlawful stops, intimidation. Jonathan's stomach sank. And nothing was done? Ortiz exhaled. Every complaint disappeared before reaching a hearing. Jonathan shook his head slowly. Someone is protecting him. Yes, she replied. And we need to know who. Mercer stormed into the locker room, slamming his fist into a metal cabinet. This is a setup. They're trying to ruin me. Officer Brent Callow, older and weary, sighed. Dan, you crossed a line. The footage is bad. Mercer snapped. You think I'm the only one doing stops like that? Half this department. He stopped himself. Callow stepped closer. Say it. Mercer swallowed hard. If I go down, I'm not going alone. Internal Affairs uncovered patterns. Falsified stop reports. Fabricated evidence. Targeted profiling. Selective enforcement. And a chain of supervisors signing off on everything. Jonathan reviewed the files late into the night. If this is accurate, he said, this isn't a rogue officer. This is an organized structure. Ortiz nodded grimly. We believe Mercer was acting under direction. Jonathan sighed. Who's giving the orders? Ortiz tapped on a folder. Deputy Chief Warren. When Jonathan entered the conference room, Deputy Chief Warren stood waiting, arms crossed, expression hostile. Judge Hale, Warren said coldly. I hope you understand the kind of trouble you're causing. Jonathan set a stack of reports on the table. I'm not causing trouble. I'm exposing it. Warren scoffed. You think one overzealous rookie is corruption? Jonathan met his gaze. Your signature is on every dismissed complaint. Warren's jaw tightened. This conversation is over. Jonathan said quietly, No, Deputy Chief, your career is. News coverage exploded. Talk shows dissected the footage. Civil rights groups marched. Old cases resurfaced. Mercer's face was on every screen in the city. Meanwhile, Jonathan visited his mother at the hospital, trying to balance duty with family. She took his hand weakly. Jonathan, whatever you do, make sure it's for justice, not revenge. Her words lingered long after she fell asleep. The disciplinary hearing room was silent as Mercer sat across from Jonathan. Judges, officials, reporters, a sea of eyes fixated on one man. Mercer's attorney tried everything. Misinterpretation of procedure, stress-related judgment error, unclear instructions from superiors. But the video played, the shove, the illegal search, the threats, the badge, silence. The board announced the decision. Officer Daniel Mercer is hereby terminated, barred from future law enforcement employment, and referred for federal civil rights prosecution. Gasps filled the room. Mercer slumped in his seat, crushed. Jonathan felt no triumph, only gravity. Justice wasn't victory. It was responsibility. Deputy Chief Warren was suspended pending investigation. 3 supervisors resigned. 9 officers were placed under review. Old cases were reopened. Attorneys lined up with civil suits. The department shook from the inside out. But something else happened too. Officers approached Jonathan quietly, one by one. "Thank you. He's been hurting people for years. No one ever stood up to them." Jonathan realized this wasn't just a scandal. It was a purge of rot that had been growing for a decade. By the time Jonathan stepped into the courtroom that morning, the city had already taken sides. Half believed he was a hero. Half believed he was a traitor. But no one expected who would walk in as a witness. A retired officer. The man who trained Mercer. Sergeant Dalton. Dalton looked older than his years, as if carrying a burden too heavy to hide. He took the stand, lowered his eyes, and said, "I should have spoken out years ago." A silence spread across the courtroom. "Mercer, he was always aggressive, always pushing boundaries. I filed a report myself once. It disappeared." Jonathan's pulse froze. This was it, the break the case needed. Dalton continued, "Internal Affairs never called me back. They never even interviewed me. Someone was protecting him." A low murmur filled the room. Jonathan realized this rabbit hole had been deeper than he thought. Someone up the chain had buried all complaints. Someone powerful. And now, Dalton had just confirmed it under oath. After Dalton's testimony, a strange event occurred. A flash drive, unmarked, anonymous, was delivered to Jonathan's office. Inside were 7 missing internal affairs complaints. All against Mercer. All accidentally deleted. All time-stamped, signed, and verified. Jonathan stared at the screen, chills crawling across his arms. Someone from inside the department had leaked them, but why now? A quiet message was attached as a text file. "Do what we couldn't." Jonathan didn't know who sent it, but he understood the meaning. He had become the department's last chance at cleansing itself. The DA, seeing the flood of new evidence, demanded an emergency hearing. Jonathan presented each complaint with surgical precision. A teenage kid slammed on a curb for asking a question. A nurse detained without cause. A delivery driver searched illegally. A man hospitalized after a resistance that never happened. Every file was like a blade cutting deeper into the truth. The DA looked exhausted. Exhausted by the pattern. Exhausted by the system. "Mr. Reeves, in your professional opinion, would Officer Mercer's actions be considered a risk to public safety?" Jonathan didn't blink. Yes, and not just a risk, a proven threat. You could feel the air shift. The room now believed him. Finally, when Mercer returned to the witness stand, something had changed. He wasn't defiant anymore. He wasn't cocky. He was unraveling, sweating, shaking, teeth clenched. The prosecutor played bodycam clips one more time, slow motion, frame by frame. Jonathan's badge. Mercer's smirk. The illegal pat-down. Mercer finally snapped. "I was doing my job." "Your job?" the prosecutor replied calmly. "Or your habit?" Mercer stood up abruptly, pointing at Jonathan. "You think you're better than us? You think you're some kind of hero?" The judge banged the gavel. "Officer Mercer, SID down." But Mercer kept shouting. "Internal Affairs is full of snakes. All of you. You ruined my life." Security rushed in. Mercer unleashed years of bitterness in seconds. And in doing so, he destroyed the last of his credibility. The public watched in disbelief. And Jonathan saw only a broken man. A man who had lived too long without consequences. The chief of police attended the next hearing. His face was gray, weighted, almost ashamed. Before the court began, he approached Jonathan. Softly, privately. "We failed you. We failed the city. Thank you for not giving up." Jonathan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The chief stepped into the courtroom and delivered a statement that would change the department. Effective immediately, A full internal review is launched. Policies will be rewritten, supervisors replaced, and transparency will become mandatory. It was the closest thing to an apology the city would ever get. Reporters flooded the courthouse steps. The city buzzed with anticipation. Mercer's supporters claimed he was being sacrificed for optics. Jonathan's supporters called him a whistleblower hero. But inside the courtroom, only facts mattered. The judge reviewed hours of footage, testimony, and recovered files. Each day, Mercer looked more defeated, more hollow, more aware of the inevitable. Jonathan, however, felt strangely calm, not triumphant, not angry, just tired, deeply tired. He only wanted one thing: truth. The defense argued Mercer acted out of caution. The prosecution argued he acted out of habit. Then Jonathan stood for his final statement. The entire room went silent. He spoke slowly, not as an investigator, not as an authority, but as a human being. Accountability is not an attack on the police. It is a duty to the badge, to the law, and to the people we serve. If we turn a blind eye to misconduct, we betray every officer who does their job with honor. Even the judge seemed moved. Jonathan sat down, his hands trembling. It was out of his control now. Finally, the judge returned with the decision. A hush fell over the courtroom. Mercer stood. Jonathan stood. The judge spoke. Officer Daniel Mercer is found guilty of unlawful detention, misuse of authority, falsifying records, and violating Fourth Amendment rights. Gasps filled the room. Mercer's shoulders collapsed, his eyes emptily staring at the floor. Then the judge continued. Furthermore, this court recommends a full federal review of previous cases involving Officer Mercer and an internal audit of procedural integrity within the department. Jonathan exhaled. A long, heavy breath he'd been holding for months. This wasn't just a verdict. It was change. Real change. Months later, Jonathan stood at the podium of a community meeting. Not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a reminder of what one voice can do. The room was filled with officers, citizens, media, and people who simply wanted to believe in justice again. Jonathan's speech was simple. Accountability is not the end of policing. It is the beginning of trust. Applause filled the hall. Outside, the city looked different, safer, more united, more aware. Jonathan walked out into the sunlight, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He wasn't just internal affairs anymore. He had become something greater, a catalyst for justice, a guardian of truth, a reminder that courage can exist even in the darkest corners. And though the scars of the past would never fully fade, the city would heal, because one man refused to stay silent. The end.